Welcome to the Lunch and Learn program. My name is Joanne Bewig. I'm president of the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. Some of our other board members are here as well today. The Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower, support, educate about, and advocate for persons on the autism spectrum and their families. The format for today is a brief overview of the topic, followed by a question and answer session. We'll try to repeat questions so that everyone will hear them. We are privileged to have on our panel today an adult with Asperger syndrome, professionals, parents, educators. I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves in just a moment. Today our presenter is Margie Gray. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is John Cody. I am on the autistic spectrum disorder. I have Asperger syndrome. I am on the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network Speakers Bureau. I speak for other groups as well. And I'm able to tell you about all this stuff from my own perspective, from my own experience with Asperger's, and how that's different for me. Is there anything else you want me to say?
I'm Sylvia Dupre, and I work for the Department of Public Schools, and I help teams of teachers that have students with autism.
I'm Jennifer Stroll, and I work for West Fargo Schools and the District Autism Specialist.
Hi, I'm Will Plankers. I work at Moorhead Senior High School. I'm a special ed teacher. I teach a program called Strategies for Interpersonal and Academic Success. I have a lot of students on the autism spectrum that have ADHD and other neurological conditions, and we really focus heavily on executive functioning and social skills. And this is my first time here, so I'm very happy to be here, and thanks.
Thank you. The good news is that everybody has the PowerPoint presentation right in front of you. So this is really what I'm going to be speaking from today. And my overview will be very brief because I want to give our panelists as much time to add detail to what we've put together. My information is by no means all-inclusive. It is a starting point for the discussion. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. So today we're talking about executive function, and we have had 2 previous programs on executive function because it is such a vast subject and has so many different dimensions to it. We've broken it down so that we addressed different areas individually. Rather than skimming the surface, we wanted to be able to go a little bit deeper with each of the subjects. So today, we're going to be discussing how executive function impacts interaction and attention. So 2 separate topics. Previously, we had an overview. Barb did a great job of giving us an overview of executive function skills, what they do, how they impact our ability to function in the world. And then our second program on executive function focused on problem solving, organization, and transitioning. So those were the 3 subjects that we covered in part 2 of executive function. Part 3, we're going to focus on interaction and attention. Now, interaction, we broke it down into 3 separate categories of types of interaction. Starting conversations, entering groups, and appreciating how my behavior affects other people. So 3 separate topics, but all very much interrelated and very much dependent on one another. So we started out with some thoughts about starting conversations. And the tricky part of starting conversations, there were some things that we felt are sort of obstacles to being able to start a conversation. First of all, you have to know a little bit about the other person. Know about their interests. Know about what you might have in common with that person. Engage, and then being able to engage based on that person's interests, being able to set aside our own personal interests to engage with someone about what they're interested in talking about right then. Being able to read the other person, am I talking too long? Are they interested in what I have to say? Are they happy? Are they sad? Should I be excited about, should I share my excitement? Or should I be a little bit more subdued and match where they are right now? And being able to start that conversation or enter that conversation appropriately based on all of that information, all the planning, understanding, reading the other person that's required in order to be able to enter the conversation in a way that is appropriate for that person in that moment. And then, to add to it, being able to make adjustments based on their reactions. So that's just the first part of starting conversations. Being able to enter a group. So what are some of the obstacles, the tricky parts of entering into a group? So being able to read what's already going on in a group. Knowing who to make eye contact with if I'm going to attempt to make eye contact. Knowing what to say. Figuring out who I should be saying it to. Knowing when to say it. Knowing when to be silent. And then knowing how to react appropriately within the group. So all kinds of social reading that is required to be able to enter into a group conversation. And then the third part of interaction that we focused on was appreciating how behavior affects others. So knowing that when I'm upset, it may be upsetting to other people. Knowing that when I can't accurately read what's going on for them, it may be off-putting, disconcerting to them. They may not understand why I'm reacting the way I am. And finally knowing that I can positively impact other people. And I'm going to tell you from personal example, that was powerful for my son when he discovered that he could have a positive impact on the people around him from his interaction with them. He lit up and has become such a great friend to the people that he interacts with, to his peers. So it can be really empowering and a positive self-esteem building situation when, for him especially, when he learned that he could have a positive impact on people. So those were the elements of interaction that we focused on. Interventions to support developing the skills to have more effective interaction. So using social stories, I think from the time kids are in elementary school, kindergartners use social stories. We can use social stories with our children as soon as we're able to start really interacting in a meaningful way with them. Talk about, I call them what if scenarios. Well, what if somebody said this to you? What if when you talk to this girl that you like and you ask her if she wants to be your girlfriend, for 10 and 11-year-olds, seriously, when did that happen, okay? I don't remember that, or maybe I don't want to remember that. So what are you gonna say? How will you feel if when she says, but I don't want to be your girlfriend? Or what are you going to say if she says, yes, I do want to be your girlfriend? Really going through the what ifs of a situation so that they can be prepared for possible outcomes and know how they might want to respond to that. Practicing. Role-playing is a great tool for working with building social interaction skills. And videotaping, to be able to, for them to be able to either watch videotapes of other people interacting or even videotaping them and allowing them to see how the interaction looks from outside. We see things from inside a house. And to be able to see the house from the outside can be a really valuable tool. So those are some of the interventions that we felt would be useful tools to work on developing those interaction skills. Attention. Now, attention is going to be a very short discussion because the three things that we identified in terms of attention that are important and sometimes lagging skills are the ability to focus, the ability to be able to persist in attention, and to sustain, to be able to persist in getting to the point of having attention and sustaining that attention. And really, a lot of the things that negatively impact those skills, because they're skills, the things that negatively impact them are really sort of, a lot of them are the same for all of them. So, when it's a non-preferred subject or topic or activity, being able to focus, persist, and sustain are definitely more challenging. When distracted by environmental stimulus, whether it's temperature, lights, noise, somebody who's sitting behind kicking their chair or tapping their pencil, those environmental things can really get in the way of the ability to focus. When distracted by current or previous stimulus, I hope that this isn't too cryptic, but my thought was when they are already focused on something else, the ability to shift that focus to be able to focus, persist, and sustain are that much more challenging. If my son is excited about something that's coming up, asking him to focus on math is going to be a real challenge for him. If he is angry, if he's upset, frustrated about something that happened or is about to happen, all of those things can really get in the way of his ability to focus. And then the final one is when in a diminished capacity. I think that really the previous one is also diminished capacity, but diminished capacity whether it's because I'm tired, I'm hungry, I haven't had enough downtime, I haven't had enough of a break from the demands of my daily life to be able to just sit and play on the Xbox and let my brain do what it needs to do to reboot, recharge, and rejuvenate. Interventions that we identified that can support in the development of the skill to be able to focus are one-on-one support for, especially in the situation of non-preferred activities. I know that for my son, math was a non-preferred activity. Even though he's good at it, he just has it in his mind, he is convinced he stinks at math, in his words. So for him, he had one-on-one para support that was gradually, over the course of 3 years, reduced to the point that he doesn't have para support for the most part during math. On days when he has diminished capacity, then he does his math in the special ed room. And that's the support that he gets. But he doesn't have to have someone sitting with him all the time. So using those supports and as appropriate for the individual, reducing them gradually over time can be effective. Reducing expectations to a manageable level, and sometimes the manageable level in this moment is I'm done, right? And not forcing the issue can be very helpful. And at some point, then very gradually rebuilding those expectations. I can tell you last year he was doing math. 2 years ago he started out, most of his assignments were reduced. he's at a point now 3 years later where he is able to, don't anybody look at the math that I just did there because it was 2 years ago and 3 years later. Math is not my forte either, just, you know. So, but he's now able to, he does almost all of the math that all the rest of the students are doing. But it was a very gradual process to increase the expectations. Addressing sensory issues, helping to identify what are the sensory issues that are getting in the way, and then working with those can be very helpful, a very helpful intervention. And then identifying with the individual coping strategies. We had a session recently where there's a specific situation that my son has a really hard time coping in. We worked with him to come up with some ideas for some coping strategies. Making sure that he's involved is the most important part of what we do, because anything that I come up with may not be really truly addressing the issue for him. And then practicing coping strategies in the absence of adverse conditions. So working on what are the coping strategies. I remember way back when in, I don't know, first grade I think, when he would learn how to blow out the candle to help him to learn how to breathe deeply. That practice happened not when he was upset. It happened when he had full capacity, when he could set aside anything that was going on right then and say, okay, yeah, I can blow out a candle. So that when it got to a point where he needed that as a support, all his OT had to do was go up to him and go, and he knew it was not a verbal prompt, but a nonverbal prompt that he was able to gradually be able to use. And last week when he got frustrated with me, I saw him sit at the kitchen counter and go, and it was, you know, for those of us who work with kids who struggle to manage their emotions, that's a big moment. So those are the thoughts and the ideas, the interventions that we put together to start the conversation. What I'd like to do is go ahead and turn it over to the panel to see are there specific things that you would like to add to what you heard? Was there something that you'd really like to go a little bit farther with in terms of talking about opportunities, strategies? You're nodding your head.
Yeah,
so,
no,
you get to talk
okay.
first.
Sounds good. Yeah, I know. I guess when we're programming for students with ASD or ADHD, our first, second, and third priority is regulation. If they're feeling regulated, they're more open to learning. They're more open to performing some of these skills that they're able to. But in a case of sensory or emotional dysregulation, they might have a harder time doing that. So, I mean, regulation is huge, and so we use the Zones of Regulation curriculum. 1 day a week in my classroom is specifically dedicated to learning regulation strategies. We've really tried a lot of different things, especially this year. We've done yoga, we've done Tai Chi. We had Kristen Frank come in and do a presentation on essential oils, which I thought was really cool. I might start using them actually. Look at it, it's really neat. And a lot of people have found that to be a successful intervention. You know, a real big thing with attention, you know, the first thing we look at is the environment. Is there something in the environment that might be impeding that student's ability to you know, sustain attention? And then we kind of look at internal mechanisms. And a lot of the times what that student needs is some kind of movement. So we'll hook them up with a fidget, we'll maybe put a band around their chair. You know, and this is for younger kids, but I saw a picture on the internet of a desk that had been kind of turned into a bike. So they have the desk right there, and then they can pedal at the same time. So I just thought that was we need like a bigger version of that for kids at the high school. I just think movement and being able to get up and move around, you know, is so crucial to learning. You know, no matter who you are. Yeah, that's kind of what I can think of right now.
We also use zones of regulation or the 5-point scale to teach kids kind of to identify their emotions and their self-regulation or their anxiety, kind of tweak all of them to target exactly what the skill is for a particular student. I have a special ed teacher in our district that I was observing in the classroom, and they had a time in their day, I think he told me they did it about once a week, where they would practice tools, and so he set up stations, because in zones of regulation they learn coping skills by using a tool. And so he had different things set out, whether it was coloring or drawing or Play-Doh or different things for them to try. And he had like the lazy 8 breathing, you know, graphic up for them, and so that the kids rotated around to the different spots and practiced and tried them, because it's an elementary classroom, and a lot of times at the elementary level, our students don't know exactly what's going to help them calm down, and they haven't found that tool or that coping strategy that works for them. So he was trying to get them to explore different options, and I would like to see other teachers doing that too. So I'm going to try and spread that idea around in our district, so we can spread it around in other places that you guys go.
And I'd also like to just say something here too. First of all, I did not have these programs when I was in school, but I can talk about other experiences. So I know that with the sensory issues, even in grade school, we found that just setting up a tape player with some headphones and then just having white noise to cancel out the sensory issues of other sounds, just having some sort of a white noise machine set up through headphones, that helped to block out everything else, and I was able to focus a lot better. So that was very beneficial for me as well. It also really struck a chime here when you were talking about diminished capacity. That is so true. When you're at a certain threshold that's past your diminished capacity, it's going to be a lot more difficult to really do what you need to do. So just, I realized even in junior high, getting a hall pass, walking up and down the halls once and going right back, and that could just be just enough of a break to kind of help me to just recharge and then get back to work.
It's interesting that you bring that up, John, because I had noted that too when Margie mentioned when capacity is diminished, there's going to be much less energy to be able to deal with things. And everybody's head was nodding on the panel, and I saw the folks in the audience too. And I think that's something that it's really important for us to remember, that when our young people are just depleted in their energy and ability to cope, that's not the time to put more demands on them. You need to understand that backing away and giving them whatever strategies you've developed to reboot, and then attending to what the issue is really critical. And sometimes I've been criticized as a grandparent of coddling, you know, letting him get away with things, when actually I know better. I know that what I'm doing is providing him that space to pull himself back together, so then he can continue on.
And that's what needs to really happen. It's a neurological difference in our brains that are just a little different, just a little different wiring that just requires us to do something to recharge or to reboot our brains. It's like a computer. You can tell a computer to do so many things with multitasking before the CPU becomes so slow and sluggish it starts making mistakes. And the same thing is happening in my brain. So
it's the same example that my grandson gives. He compares himself to a computer, and he needs time to reboot.
Yep.
And sometimes kids need a safe zone to go to. In school, it might be in the back of a classroom where maybe there's some music that they could listen to, or favorite books, maybe a beanbag chair that they can relax in, or maybe it's the counselor's office or another classroom, but they need to know that there is a place they can go to when they're feeling like the anxiety is just really high.
For me, in high school, I had a built-in one period free in the middle of the day that I could just go and do something else to recharge for the rest of the day. I would go to the library, sit in a beanbag chair and read a book. And that was just enough. Yes?
Barb, you have a
I
question?
was just going to say too, listening to everybody talk, that even in those coping skills, the whole idea of less is more, that I think a lot of times, even when we're trying to talk to kids or to figure out what do you need right now or what do you do, we're busy yapping, that depletes the resources even more. And I know I have to keep reminding myself and staff that I work with that don't wait for an answer. Ask the question, walk away, and if you can sort of pre-plan some of the things that you've got, whether it's the sensory or all of that, great, but in that moment, even when we're trying to be helpful, sometimes we're adding to the disruption by trying to, now remember to use your coping skills, or remember you can do this, and that just diminishes. I know you nodding, John, when I was talking about that, sometimes in our best efforts to provide those supports, we're actually poking with a sharp stick.
Lisa?
My son will be transitioning to public school in March out of Prairie Autism program over here. And are all classrooms have the same goal in mind? As far as a zone, safe zone. He needs like a stability ball for movement, which I think about getting one at home. They're using that program over here. Breaks, sensory breaks, because the school that he came from, they got sensory breaks every half hour. So is that kind of something that you would set up with the teacher yourself, or is that something that's kind of a goal of the district, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what grade is he really be
He's
going
a
into?
kindergartner.
Oh, kindergarten. Okay. Yeah, just from my experience with the IEP process, we have a lot of flexibility to make certain things very individualized. And if he needs a sensory break every half an hour, it's just a matter of kind of coordinating that with his general ed teachers. And basically the goal of any program is to really just get that student what he or she needs to be successful. And if it's going to look different for every student, but it's just kind of a matter of getting everybody on the team on board, and everybody knows what the expectation is, and really what that student needs, and not only that, but understand why that student needs that. And that can even be more of a challenge with maybe certain team members that aren't as in tune to these set of needs. But yeah, I think it's just real important to have a good team that can advocate for those needs.
And I think it's important to know that that kind of an accommodation will be in the IEP. It should be in the IEP. But getting it from the paper to people's attention is often, I think, our parents' responsibility, or one of the things we do. Your case manager will make sure teachers are obligated to know what's in the IEP, but there's nothing wrong, right, with the parent saying, these are the accommodations I think he's probably going to really need every day. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that, and that's something that we know really helps him.
I would encourage parents to be active in the IEP planning and reminding teachers this is in the IEP.
And you have to be really flexible, because there are different strategies that can work one day and may not work the next day. And so it's like you always have to be thinking, kind of have your toolbox ready. Like, if this doesn't work, is there something else that you could try? Tiredness can make a difference. If the child's hungry, that can make a difference. If they maybe a change in routine during the day, all of those subtle things can make a huge impact on learning.
I have another question. What training do the teachers get for autism Asperger's students?
Special ed teachers?
Well, just
or-
if he's in a regular classroom, about going to an autism classroom, what does that look like and how can you help that?
That can vary by teacher, whether they've sought out any extra training in it, or if they've had, if they've gone to conferences or attended any classes. Because of course, all teachers who are certified by the state have to take so many classes to renew their licensure, but they get to choose what those classes are in, so it kind of varies. It's a lot of teaching that kind of goes on every day, to be honest.
Well, both of you also are in a position of being advisors to teachers within the school
Right.
districts
Yes,
as well. So it's also, you can also call on, and see your child will be in FAR, so it would be Sylvia to help make sure that those kinds of things. And I think also sometimes consulting with the principal to say, what do you think would be the best match for my child for next year, maybe. I know when our children transferred to a different school when they were in elementary school, we didn't know any of the teachers, but we knew that one in particular needed a very particular kind of atmosphere to be successful. And so we just said to the principal, this is how she learns best, this is how she is most comfortable in school. What do you think would be a good placement? And it worked beautifully. I think sometimes we as parents worry that we're going to come off as demanding. And I think we just need to keep in mind that we are simply the experts on our child. And not simply, but we are the experts on our child, and we want to be that team member that helps make sure that the maximum opportunities are there for our child. And so we have every right to speak up and work collaboratively with the school.
Actually, I wanted to say that my daughter has autism, and I actually spent a fair amount of time with him when I could with her teacher. And when she went to kindergarten, I just sent along a sheet that said, "This is my daughter. These are her quirks. This is what helps her. This is what's not going to help her. I want to teach you about my daughter so that you can, teach you about my child, so that you can just go, okay, here's where I need to start. Here's what."
A letter of introduction. This is my child. Great.
Try to train your teacher. This is my child. It's not going to be everybody's, but that helps you out.
We've had students whose parents do that, and it works pretty well to be sure that the teachers are getting that information, especially as you get into those upper grade levels where you're not working with one teacher, you're working with 6 teachers that have your student or your child for 50 minutes. But in your case right now, I would recommend that you invite school staff to come to the transition meeting that the autism program for Prairie will have. I know I've attended some of those, and we've had case managers or principals that will attend. And then they'll hear the recommendations and the things that they found out at Prairie that work well for your child, and then they can take those back along with your assistance to get those implemented in the school setting if they weren't already being done.
Do you find that teachers as a whole are happy to have ongoing conversations back and forth, contact with the parent about how things are going? Our family has had very positive experience with that.
There's always a variety of teachers, and they're at all different levels of learning.
Email can be really a nice way to just say, it looked like it was a good day today, is there anything I should know when he comes home, something like that.
Sometimes just a real quick message of even saying, we were out of town this weekend, Susie might be a little tired coming to school, and when you're aware of that, then you know that sensory area in your room, or that kind of that safe zone, you might think, okay, if we're going to target that a little more today, just in case. It's just kind of thoughts on your mind of how to support and help the child. And then in return, we can let the parent know, maybe just in a real quick message, how the day went.
Some more questions about teaching these kinds of skills to our young people.
So I have a son who's 11 and was just diagnosed. And so I have worked with the schools very closely throughout since kindergarten. And one thing that we have used this year that's worked really well is he has a book at his desk, and he has the right to read that book whenever he needs to reboot. Last year he was leaving the classroom, he was leaving the classroom a lot, and they were concerned about that, and I was too. And so this is a new technique that we came up with, and it seems to be working well, as long as they don't get to the book.
So he has the book right there at his desk to just go to his, when he needs it.
Yes, he just pulls it out. Sometimes he reads a lot with me, and that's challenging for the classroom teacher to accept. But, so, and I've worked a lot with the school to try to get those strategies in place. And now that I have the diagnosis, I think I'm going to have more success.
You know, that reminds me of a personal experience, which is that when I was really upset, I was at the doctor and getting some diagnostic news that was hard to hear. That was all I heard. Everything else that came after that, I was distressed, and I was not really hearing it. And fortunately, my husband was there to help, hear the rest of it. And so later, when I was calm, we could talk about it, and I could process it. So the fact that a teacher may say, or a family member may say, well, but he's missing out, he's not learning anything. Well, he's not going to be able to anyway in that heightened state, whatever it might be. Is that accurate, Don?
Yes.
And so giving him that opportunity to pull away and then come back. And he does come back, right? He wants to be there. He doesn't leave the room anymore, he stays.
For the most part, yes. And the other thing is that I've learned to, like, if I need to talk to him about something, I say, hey, we need to talk about this, and then I can do something else, and then I come back, and I can have an actual conversation about it with him, and he will input a lot more. If I say, let's talk about this, and I'm right there in, in this space, talking about something, it doesn't work. So that's something else I've learned as well.
Don, could you maybe have some insight into why that might be? That saying, oh, I need to talk with you, and then having some space before the talk?
Yeah. You have something that's really on your mind that is really bothering you, or bothering you on a very deep level, and you are getting overwhelmed, overloaded, and you just need to talk to somebody about it. I do that from time to time as well, but then I need just a bit of time just to kind of organize my thoughts, figure out how I'm going to present this, how I'm going to say this in a way that you'll be able to understand. I think there's a neurological difference, and just trying to figure out the best way to say it. And it just takes some time to just organize those thoughts, because at this point we're in such a heightened state, it takes a bit longer to say, okay, what part of this paragraph comes first, second, third, fourth? How do I present this in a certain order that will make the most sense? So I'm doing a lot of stuff that you're not seeing behind the scenes. I need just a bit of time to organize my thoughts. Then after that, I need to talk about it. That's why I came to you to say, okay, I need to talk about it, but let me organize my thoughts here first. Just a heads up that I need to talk to you.
So you might do exactly the kind of thing that she described, say, okay, I need to talk, but give me minutes, or I'll come back to it. What about, like if I came up to you and said, I have something I really want to talk to you about, and maybe you just weren't ready to listen to me then, and then I walk away, and then we come back later and can talk about it? Is there something unique about that that is helpful to you? If I just kind of give you a warning, oh, I do want to talk to you about something?
Yeah, the heads up will help, I would say. Just say that you want to talk to me about something, let me know when you're ready. And I will come back to you, but I just need just a few moments to just kind of collect myself and think, okay, I am now in the ability to listen, so now I'll approach you again.
Does that kind of help clarify why that works? And it might be having to shift from what he was doing
Yeah,
to
it's shifting.
getting ready
It's
to...
shifting.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So my big fear right now is he's transitioning to the school in the fall. And I feel like that is going to be a huge challenge for him. And I'm just curious what kind of strategies can be put in place to make that transition better?
There really were no strategies when I transitioned, but it was a huge change and a very difficult transition. The first half of my first year in 7th grade, maybe less than that, maybe like 6 weeks, I was overwhelmed and reaching meltdown points pretty often. But over time, though, I did adjust to it, so it is possible. It takes a little bit of time, and hopefully now the school system has new techniques to put into place that weren't there when I transitioned into 7th grade middle school.
There should be a transition meeting between the two levels. And at that time, you know, I love the idea of having a letter talking about strengths and weaknesses and how your child works. Because I think every team wants to know that. It's much easier to put into place things that the student likes than if you have no idea, because then you're starting out cold. So I think that's a great idea to kind of personalize it.
One thing that we do in West Fargo is we organize tours. So I organize tours for all the students that are 5th graders going to 6th grade to meet someone at the building, maybe get introduced to a principal and get a tour around the building. And then we encourage parents to go back during those registration days in August. The buildings are staffed then and open, so you can get your child's registration, you can get their class schedule, and you can keep going back as many times as you need to during those open hours and walk through that schedule and get them at least familiar and comfortable within the building, because there are a lot of other things that are new, you know, new teachers, new students, it's a bigger environment, but if they're comfortable in the building, that's, you know, one step that you take in to get them prepared.
And during those first few weeks or so of that big transition, make sure that you have a lot of distraction techniques at home so that he can decompress and
So let him play his Xbox for as long as he
basically, yeah. You will be needing to have some sort of a distraction to decompress, because that transition is stressful. It is. So
My grandson comes to my house every day after school. I pick him up and he stays until Mom picks him up after work. And there are times when he has lessened screen time or no screen time, depending on what some things are going on. But his 30 minutes to 45 minutes every day at the end of school on the computer or on the screen, which are when he chooses, never changes. That is always there, because he's identified that as well as something he needs to reboot. Pull himself down, relax all of that busyness in his brain that's been going on all day. And so, yeah, those kind of things I think are important. One thing you mentioned, John, that I think might be important to look at too is in the transition meeting, you'll have some input into what his schedule will look like. And I would strongly advocate for whatever time of the day you know he would need a break, or a time perhaps this time of day would be better for him to be in the resource room than this time. And they can't always meet that exactly, but that's important to build in those kinds of things into his schedule. And isn't there a little bit of flexibility in this kind of
There's some
schedule?
flexibility in it.
No, I was going to tell her, my grandson was very lucky, he went into 6th grade this year, and they did a good job before school was out pairing him with his teachers. They knew before school was out what teachers he would have in junior high. And we know that this teacher does this, and so he would have this teacher for math, and he would have this teacher for history, and their personalities kind of fit. And so before the parents and before school started, probably when the teachers came back for a work day, they took, 15 minutes or whatever, and I happened to be at that meeting, and all the teachers sat down, and Mom and Dad and Jake and I, and met all the teachers before school started. And that was, so he knew he had met everybody, and yeah.
They might not always be able to set that up that far ahead of time, but knowing that before the first day, and seeing the person's face, I think, is important.
Yes. And we can really reduce
And-
that anxiety, and he has
Well-
no organizational skills whatsoever, so trying to get him to
Is he,
pull together everything.
is
I
he
think
in
is
Fargo
gonna
school?
help.
They had a nice program, and Jake and 2 other kids had a little summer program with someone, and I don't know how that happened, but he spent a week with these 2 kids and went to, he spent 2 weeks, as a matter of fact, maybe 3 hours a day, and they did some social skills and they visited the schools.
I think it's also important to kind of keep in mind that some kids get more anxious if they know about it like too far
Yeah,
ahead.
they had to stop talking about it when he started 5th grade, that they were all about, you guys gotta get ready for 6th grade, and I had to say, no.
Do I
stop.
Being a teacher myself, I just like that because
Crazy.
they're 5th graders for a whole school year. Let's let them be 5th grader.
And we had to stop him, he cannot even mention 6th grade, and now he's to a point where he's okay with it, and he's actually telling me, hey mom, the people from Discovery were here yesterday, and he was actually kind of excited about it. So it's giving him that time to, everything's gotta kind of be on his time. And that's just the way it is.
I think the key thing you said there was at the beginning of the school year. When you're starting 5th grade, you're already in the middle of a transition and your mind is already getting a little twisted up because of the change, and then talking about, okay, here's another change in the distant. But we're talking about it, so these 2 changes come together, and that will just be too much for the brain to handle, and I'll just shut down. Time it. Don't put in too many transitional changes at one time. We're just going to make it worse.
Well, and as you said, on his time frame, some kids will want to have it a longer time ahead, some will need it just like 2 days ahead. I had a neighbor when my kids were little who didn't tell her children until the day of that they were going to the zoo. They were neurotypical kids, but that was what her children needed, whereas mine needed like a couple days ahead. They liked it. Mark.
I'm Mark. I have a son with autism, and we've been at it a long time. My son is 13 weeks from graduating. I'm counting the days. I don't know about him. Oh my God. My question for the group is, when you're talking executive function, where we struggle so is time management. Talk about taking this one, he's not his own time zone. And how do we get him to do the things that are not preferred when they should be done? That's we struggle so with that. That's without being negative. I'm trying to teach him to do that because that's a skill he needs.
How about writing out a schedule of an order of things to do? Have you tried that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, one thing we found to be particularly effective at the high school is to really utilize technology. We kind of have a bring your own device policy where students can bring in phones, tablets, and things like that. And what we did actually just last week with a student that kind of struggles with time management and getting to places late, like, oh, maybe I forgot my pencil, and just those order of things. We'll schedule in reminders for the iPod that goes around with him all day is going off periodically, and he sees it and then he remembers to do it, and it's basically doing the same thing as what you would be doing verbally, but he's able to get those prompts in a more independent fashion. So I would definitely encourage the use of technology, and I'm sure there's tons and tons of apps out there. If he needs something in more of a visual format, or if just a simple text reminder would do the trick. There's just lots and lots of options, and especially now that he's moving on to that next stage where he's going to be more independent. Having that device be kind of an executive secretary is going to be huge.
Yeah, we do that. We use an iPhone and we pull daily schedules in there and all that stuff's scheduled. But we're running problems is when you get home and you want to be STEM. I understand that. have.
Sure.
But sometimes that English has got to get done.
Right.
So when are we going to do that? And it's always, and maybe it's just going to be 17. I don't know.
Well, there is that too.
We talked about
Developmental
being a
piece.
teenager. One thing that a lot of students do, we have a very functional routine in place in the classroom. So every day a student comes in and updates their planner, whether that's a paper planner or a device. But for some students, we kind of take it to the next level where they're not only writing down the assignment and the due date, but when they plan to get that done. And just to establish that at school and just kind of follow through at home by communicating with the parent, and that's one thing we've tried and we've had some success with that. But just to have them write down in their planner or type it in, but not only what it is, but when they're going to do it as well.
I like that.
Can you tell me, how does he do when he doesn't do the homework? How does he do on tests? Is he successful at taking tests if he doesn't do the homework?
Oh, we do the homework.
But if he didn't, if
Well, I
he
don't
did.
know. I don't ever let that happen.
I
I still have control.
Right, right. But one thing that I see with some kids is that they are really good listeners in class, and they aren't students that need to take notes. They remember the information, and that comes easy to them. But the hard part is organizing and doing the homework. And I don't know that the homework always makes sense to them because they understand it. So why would you do something if you already get it? And so then I think we have to think about then what's the purpose of homework? Can we somehow tweak with the teacher a way of looking at homework and saying, is there a more relevant question or is there a more relevant task that we could give that would connect with your child? Because I think sometimes homework is busy work, and they might view it as that. Like, well, why do I want to waste an hour doing that? I know that. And so I think we're fighting a system when they already know the answer.
Making it relevant has really helped my son.
Sorry, say that again.
Making it relevant has really helped my son. There was a test he was supposed to take and he shut down and refused to take it. The assistant principal explained to him that it was a test that the district was using to evaluate the teachers, and suddenly he took the test with no problems. He needs to know why.
Do you guys have a lot of students that you do a very modified take on homework?
I think it really depends on the teacher but the more I'm seeing students that are on the spectrum, I'm just seeing that it's really hard to get them to do these kind of unnecessary tasks.
Sure.
And so we're fighting a battle.
Well, and another aspect of it is that they have really worked hard all day long to hold it together, to try and make sense in a world that doesn't make sense in the same way it does to the rest of us, and negotiate all of those social interactions. What does this mean? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, which actually is a better level of social development than we see sometimes. And making all of those transitions and thinking, like my grandson's in high school, from here to here to here to here, he's really well depleted of coping strategies by the end of the day. And he doesn't do much homework at all, which works fine because the teacher's noted in his last thing he gets C's and D's for completion and aces all of the tests.
So that's the question.
So we have to really look at that. And I'm not saying that not doing the work is the best answer because, again, that helps with learning to organize and put your thoughts together, and, but...
But could the team come up with maybe a different way of studying that homework?
Picking and choosing many things,
Right.
how much of it they need to complete.
Maybe it's not a full page, maybe it's a question that's more relevant.
This is an important thing you brought up. Thank you. We have just like a minute or two left. Are there another question or two?
With John, he always needed to just sit and listen to the speaker, the teacher, whoever was talking at the time. If they made him take notes while they were speaking, he'd lose track, he wouldn't gain the information. He sat there, he listened, he knew the information. They had someone else in the classroom write notes for him, but where he was able to accelerate would be if they would just leave him alone and let him sit there and listen and not have to take notes. He would remember.
And maybe not always be looking at the speaker at the same time.
Not always, doesn't always have to look at the speaker, but I am hearing the speaker, and when I'm taking notes, then my mind is focusing on, okay, trying to write down every word that that person is saying, trying to listen to what that whole thing is saying, shifting my, I am consistently shifting my focus, writing, listen, write, listen. I get lost track of it, so if I just listen, I absorb the information a whole lot more and a whole lot better.
And you also mentioned an accommodation in the meantime where someone else takes the notes. Well, if they're taking notes anyway, let your student have a copy as well.
And another thing that we've done with notes, in addition to teachers making those things available online and maybe having a paraprofessional write down the notes, is when a teacher does notes on the board and students are expected to to record it in some fashion, we'll loan out a device, an iPad, or they can use their phone. They can just take a picture of the notes on the board and then just, like John said, just sit back and listen. So they're just working in one modality at a time, and you get more out of it.
I'm afraid we'll need to bring this to an end and run out of time and overtime a little bit. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for participating and coming, spending your time today. A particular thank you to Blake, who shared a lot of his information in our handouts. And so thank you for that. That's really valuable to all of us. Please be sure to fill out your feedback form. We really do pay attention to those, and just leave it on the back table. Thank you very much.